My name is Miss Yellow Shoes, and today I'm going to show you how to make this fox doll. Here's a list of all the things you're going to need. When you're cutting out the pattern, make sure you're paying attention to which pieces require you to add a little bit of extra seam allowance around the edge. This just helps me get everything condensed onto as few pages as possible, so you're not printing out like 12 or 13 pages for this pattern. Now that you've got all of your pieces cut out and you've paid attention as to which ones need to have extra seam allowance put around the edge, we're going to start working on the face. I'm using a flannel fabric. One side of my fabric is fuzzy, the other side is not as fuzzy. So I'm going to pick the fuzzy side to be the right side of my fabric. I'm going to take the fox face piece and I'm going to place it on, and I'm going to pin it. Now we're just going to use the sewing machine and just do a straight stitch all the way around the fox face to tack it in place. So I'm just going to use a straight stitch, maybe about 1.5 or something like that. Okay, so now my face piece has been attached to my fox. I'm also going to add a little tag that says it's handmade. You don't have to do this, but I like to add that to all of my dolls. So I'm going to place mine roughly right here, knowing that I have a 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So I'm just going to go ahead and tack that and just do a quick little straight stitch across my tag to tack it in place. At this point, I'm going to add my eyes and my nose. I like to use safety eyes and safety noses. You can get these in bulk online, or you can get them at your sewing shops, your craft stores. If you wanted to embroider instead, now is the time to do that. But to attach my safety eyes and my safety nose, what I'm going to do is just take a small pair of scissors and I'm just going to poke into the doll where I want my pieces to go. So I'm going to stick my nose in. I would always rather start with a smaller hole than a larger one because you can always make it a little bit bigger. So there's my safety nose. Sometimes it can be tricky to get it on, but that's why they call them safety eyes and safety noses. They don't easily come out. So there's my nose, and now I'm actually going to use a pencil and mark where I want my eyes to go. Or of course you could embroider it, or you could also use puffy fabric paint to make little closed eyes or eyelashes or things like that. So I'm just going to use a regular pencil, and I want my eyes roughly right here. You can place them wherever you think it looks the best, but that's where I'm going to be putting mine. So same thing, I'm taking a sharp pair of scissors. Be very careful. I have hurt myself doing this in the past. Go nice and slow and make a little hole. Always start out with a smaller hole than you think you might need, because you can always make it bigger. But once you've made the hole too big, there's no going back. Yeah. So now our fox has a little face. The next thing we need to work on is his ears. So I have 2 sets that are the same color as the body of the fox. And then for the inner ear, I like to choose a fun fabric. So I picked this one that has little stars on it. You could do mismatched ears, which would be super cute with 2 different patterns. You can make it pink, you can make it orange, you can make it whatever color you like. Now we're going to place both pieces together, right sides together, like that. And we're going to pin. And same thing for the other ear, pin together. And now with my sewing machine, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch of seam allowance and sew all the way around the ear, leaving the bottom open for turning right side out later. And if you make a mistake with the seam allowance, there's a lot of extra room for error. I'm going to cut off the excess fabric, and so you will have an ear that looks. Careful when you're poking out your ears. Okay, now I'm going to take these over to my iron and I'm going to iron them flat. Now we're going to attach the ears to the fox. So I'm going to put right sides together. I'm going to attach mine to the doll where the bottom of the ear is just barely touching the edge of the fox head, because I know when I go around it with my 1/2 inch seam allowance to attach the front and the back of the body together, that 1/2 inch seam allowance will catch the ears. So this is just to kind of tack it in place so you can see it's just barely touching the top of the head. So I'm going to go ahead and do just a straight stitch just along the edge, just to tack it in place. Okay, now we're going to take the back piece of the doll, right sides together, place it on top of the face. If you did use safety eyes or buttons, it is easier to pin it with the safety eye part pointing up. It just makes it a little bit less bumpy. So go ahead and pin those pieces together. Try to line them up as nicely as you can. Now, for whatever reason, I personally struggle sewing all the way around in one shot and getting it to match up right here where the head meets the body. So what I do is I start at the bottom, I go all the way up, I turn, and then I go to about halfway around the doll, and then I stop. I remove my project, I flip it over, and then I do the same thing on the other side and meet at the top where my first set of stitches was. I don't know why, I just struggle with it. If you can sew it up and around and down again in all one shot, that's amazing. You get 5 stars, but I personally struggle with that. So I'm gonna do it in 2 shots where I go up from the bottom to the top of the head, stop, take my project out, flip it over, and do the same thing on the other side. Don't forget that this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and to backstitch at the beginning of your sewing project, because that will help hold everything together nice and tight when we flip it right side out. It's a good idea to cut off excess fabric. This will help make your project less bulky and make it easier for turning right sides out. And now we get to turn it around and see what it looks like. Oh my goodness, it's so cute. I've made over 200 dolls at this point, and I never get tired of turning them right side out and seeing their cute little faces. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's so cute. Okay, we're going to put this aside, and I'm going to send you over to a different video that I've already made showing you how to make and assemble the arms and the legs, how to attach everything to the body, and we will come right back here at the end and I'll show you the finished product. I'm going to put the limbs right sides together and pin. Right now I'm working on the legs. And then pin. I like to use just 1 pin, but if you need to use more, that is perfectly fine. I have 2 arms, right sides together, pinned together, and 2 legs. I'm going to sew them with a straight stitch with a 1/2 inch of seam allowance while sewing. I will be cutting off excess fabric to help reduce bulkiness and to help ease the turning of the piece. If you're concerned about this doll holding up properly to extreme play, I recommend also doing a zigzag stitch around the edge just to help everything be super, super durable. Okay, I have all 4 of my limbs. I'm going to turn them right side out You might want to use a chopstick or a pencil to help you do this. Now I'm going to show you how to attach the legs to the body. I'm going to take the body and take the raw edge and turn it in on itself, maybe about a 1/2 inch or so, something like that. You can put a pin in here if that's helpful for you. I'm going to take one of the legs, I'm going to put it inside of the cow body, also about a 1/2 inch or so. I like to try and line up my seams on the leg with the seam on the side of the body. This will take a little bit of finagling, but I promise the further we get into it, the easier it will get. Now I'm going to take my needle and thread and I'm going to start stitching. I like to try and hide the knot inside of the doll. So if I need to, I will try and poke the knot down inside of there. Now I'm just going to use a simple straight stitch to go all the way across the doll's body. Okay, and now that leg is tacked in place. I don't have to worry about holding that anymore. I'm going to sew a little bit along the bottom of the doll before attaching the other leg. Now I'm starting to get about halfway through and I think it's about time to stick the other leg in. I'm going to try and finagle it a little bit to make sure that both legs are the same length. I don't want one leg poking out more than the other. I like to try and line up the seams on the side. It's not necessary. That's just how I like to do it. And I'm going to continue sewing across. All right, I have sewn all the way across one time just using a basic straight stitch or running stitch. Now I'm going to go back across the other way, making sure that my stitches going in between all of those gaps. Insert my needle so that my stitch meets where that last one ends. There shouldn't be any gaps in the stitching because when you're going back through the other way, you're filling in all of those gaps so that there is a streamline of running stitches or straight stitches all the way across the bottom of the doll. So do you see here how the stitches go all the way across the bottom and there are no gaps? If you are unsure if your stitches are tight enough, you can also go back and forth several times just to make sure everything is super, super secure. I am going to go ahead and make a knot. I like to make at least 2 knots just to be sure everything stays where I want it. Then I like to hide my excess thread by poking into the doll and then cutting off the thread like that. And now we're going to work on the arms. They have been stuffed. I'm going to turn the raw edge inside on itself about a 1/2 inch or so. It's a really good idea to fold down the raw edge of both arms at the same time so you can lay them next to each other and make sure that one arm is not longer than the other. Now, there are a couple different ways that you could close up the arm. I like to do a whip stitch because I like seeing the stitches. It gives like the hallmark and the whimsy of having a handmade doll. It's also very secure. That's what I prefer. You could also go through and just do a straight stitch if you're comfortable with that. That's what we did at the bottom of the doll right here. You could do an invisible stitch if you don't want to see any stitch marks. I prefer to do a whip stitch that I'm going to show you right now. I have the full arm so that both seams are on the side. And I'm just going to hide my knot on the inside of the doll. And I like to just do a small whip stitch all the way across the top of the arm. Now at this point, I like to add a button. So I'm going to put my needle in and poke it out about right here. And I like to use these small wooden buttons. You can use whatever you like. They're just like buttons you would use on a dress shirt or something like that. These are the ones that I like to use. So I'm actually going to put the button on right now. And I'm not trying to super securely attach my button. I'm just putting enough stitches just to hold it in place. I'm going to make a knot at the back of the arm, do another knot for extra security, and cut off the excess. And we're going to do that to the other arm as well. Now, this is where you are going to want a doll making needle. This needle is pretty long. I'd say maybe 5 inches, maybe 4.5 inches or so. You can do this next step with a regular needle. It's just going to take a lot more squishing to get the needle all the way across. I have both of the arms done and ready. On the back of one arm, I'm going to poke through. I'm going to go through the button back to the back of the arm. Okay. And now I'm going to figure out exactly where I want my arms to go on the doll. I want them to go about right here. So first I'm just going to do a little stitch just to get that arm in the right spot. Now I'm going to go back into the arm. Every time I go through the arm, I want to make sure I am going through the button. That is what is going to help make this attachment very, very secure because you're going through the button each time. Okay, now I'm going to do that again. Pull it nice and tight. I just went through the arm. Now I'm going to go into the doll's body. Just make a small, small, small stitch. Pull it nice and tight. Going back into the doll's arm through the button. Back into the button. And now I'm going to go all the way across to the other side of the doll. This is why having a doll making needle is very, very helpful. I'm going to go through the back of the other arm, through the button, back through the button to the back of the arm, and pull to get that arm in place where I want it. Now I'm going to go through the doll's shoulder like this. I loosened up my arm a little bit so you could see what I was doing. Pull it nice and tight. Go back through the arm to the button. Go through the button. Back in through the button. And now I'm going to start going all the way across again to the other side of the doll. Once I've poked through the body on the other side of the doll, I'm going into the arm, back through the button, back into the button. And I'm being very careful and mindful where my needle is poking out. I kind of want it to stay in the same general area just so you don't really see those stitches. And I'm going to go all the way through the doll again to the other side. Through the arm, poke through the buttonhole, back in through the buttonhole, into the arm, into the body, all the way back across to the other side, and repeat. So I will do this over and over and over again until I feel like my arms are very, very secure. And then I'm going to show you how I tie off. I also like to do this with at least a couple strands of thread. So I'm done with this one. And this arm feels pretty secure. So what I'm going to do actually is wrap the arm with some of the excess thread. This just kind of helps give it a little bit of a cleaner look, and it helps kind of protect those stitches. And now I'm going to make a knot. I'm going to make another knot. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I poke through the doll just to kind of hide that excess thread. Now I'm going to get myself a little bit more thread on the needle, go back through a couple more times just to make sure everything's very, very secure. And then when I tie off, I've already wrapped this this thread right here, I'm going to tie off on this side where I wrap the inner arm a little bit with the thread and then tie it off. That is how you make your own fox doll. The pants pattern is available in the description. The skirt did come with this pattern that you purchased, and there will be a video link in the description showing you how to make that. I would love to see how yours turned out, so if you would tag me on any of my socials online, or if you want to send me a message with a picture of your doll, I would just be tickled to bits. Thank you so much for sewing with me. I hope you had a wonderful time. And I'll see you next time. Bye!